New female archbishop? Not in the eyes of Christ. Let me explain why it has to be men that are priests. Adam and Eve, the original sin, didn't happen until Eve took of the fruit, which was tempted to her by the serpent. Nothing happened. She took it from the tree, nothing happened. She took it to Adam, nothing happened. When Adam got his hands on the fruit, it broke, it shattered. The grace of God left them. They were naked and afraid. The serpent ran off, and then original sin was committed. Matter became flesh, and flesh began lusting after impurity and everything that was not God. It wasn't until Adam took of the fruit. So what happened? The new Eve, being Mary, had to bring forth the man who was Christ to be pinned back to the tree. He is the bread of life. That has to go back onto the tree, whereas it was the tree of life, tree of knowledge. Had to go back onto the tree in order to undo what had been done before, or give people an opportunity to do that. The part of undoing is reopening the gates of heaven. On the way to hell, he passed through purgatory. In hell, he spoke to Judas. We don't know what he said, but he spoke to Judas. The gates of hell literally were kicked open by 3 archangels. Everyone in hell and everything in hell was forced to adore Christ. On his way out of hell, he went through purgatory, which is the space between here and the center of the earth being hell, and gathered up all the saints, St. John the Baptist and St. Dismas and St. Joseph and so on and so forth, and reopened the gates of heaven. The new Eve, being Mary, was foretold, and right at the beginning in the book of Genesis after the fall. I will put full enmity between you and the woman, and the seed of the woman will crush, the heel of the seed of the woman will crush your head, or the heel of the woman, the seed of the heel of the woman, will crush your head. The woman being Mary. If Mary had full enmity between herself and Satan, she would not have known anything to do with Satan. Therefore, she would not have known original sin. So she would have been born without sin. And she would have also not known sin during her life, which would have made her sinless. It's in the Bible. Just read it. The new Eve, Mary. New Adam, Jesus. Jesus appointed apostles, priests, bishops, pope. 12 apostles, 12 men. They were all men. They had to be, because it was not until when a male, accepted the fruit that fall of man began. Didn't mean to rhyme. It has to be men to bring people back to God, because it was appointed by God to be a man to release men from original sin through man being put back on the tree, i.e. the cross. Christ says, unless you pick up your cross and follow me, you cannot be an apostle. So it has to be men. The first bishop, the first pope, the first priests were men. The people who prepared a way before Christ, like St. John the Baptist, Abraham, Noah, they all had a part to play, were men. Before people say, oh, it's patriarchal, and so on and so forth, where do you think Mary is? Immediately after the Trinity, Mary. Immediately after the Trinity, Mary. Mary is elevated above the angels, above the saints. She is right up there. If God had to pick any one of us, any one of his angels, any one of his saints, he would gladly do away with all of us, but her. Everything she did in her life, she saw no consequence for herself. She saw nothing that she would have to give up. She never for 1 second thought about herself. Standing at the foot of the cross, she was complete in every single virtue. Every single virtue. She did not know original sin, therefore she did not know the pains of childbirth. Her birth was like nothing else. The whole planet reacted to the birth of Jesus, the nativity. Christ was the only other person who was completely sinless. St. John the Baptist was sinless after the visitation. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Oh, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, for when the child in my womb heard your voice, it leapt for joy. Or when I heard your voice, the child in my womb leapt for joy. At that moment, he became sinless. So he wasn't conceived sinless, but he was born sinless. It's all in the Bible. There's nothing patriarchal about the church. There is nothing in the church that goes against anything in the Bible. Yes, people do things in the name of God, in the name of Christ, that go against things, but there is no teaching within the church that contradicts anything that Christ gave the church. Not in its foundation, not in its popes. There have been some bad popes, but we cannot pick and choose which bits we follow. I think it was St. Faustina or St. Catherine, can't remember which one, said, even if the Pope was to lead you to hell, we must follow him. The Pope isn't just infallible in his teachings and what he says, but where he leads us. If Christ was still here, not everyone would agree with everything he says, but we would still have to follow him. If St. Peter was still here, not everyone would agree with what he says or what he does, but we would still have to follow him. It's the point of him appointing us, his sheep, his flock, a shepherd, being the Pope. Has to be men. Women can be nuns, sisters. They can actually be elevated quite high. If you look into it, quite high. Nothing is patriarchal about what Christ has done and continues to do for us. If people understood the position that Mary has, there would never be a patriarchal, slanderous nonsense against the church. Ever. Mariamology. Her apparitions, her visitations. The fact that she gave St. Padre Pio the wounds. Every great saint has had a devotion of some kind to Our Lady. Pope Benedict XVI, Pope John Paul II, St. Padre Pio, St. Maximilian Kolbe. They've all had a great devotion to Our Lady. So if you want to be saved, you have to be in the new ark, i.e. the church. Best way to get into the church is to have a personal relationship with Christ. The best way to get a personal relationship with Christ, as with any man, is through his mother. Through his mother. No grace comes to this earth except through the Blessed Mother. Saint Louis de Montfort. No grace comes to the earth except through the Blessed Mother. When she appeared to St. Catherine, and she was wearing the rings, and all the rays of light were coming from the rings, there was a couple of fingers where there were no rays, and she asked, why are there no rays coming from these fingers? He said, these are the graces that people do not ask for. Her intention, her heart is so perfectly united to God, that the Holy Spirit never left her after the Annunciation. So, all grace comes through the Blessed Mother by means of the Holy Spirit, which she is perfectly united to. It's not complicated, people.